307 was looking like a disaster, but it actually turned out really well. So let's break it down. Alex Pereira versus Khalil Rountree, kind of an insane matchup to make, thinking that Ankalaev is fighting 3 weeks later on the Abu Dhabi card.
But that's what he wanted. Ankalaev wanted to fight in Abu Dhabi over fighting Alex Pereira.
Do you think so?
It's how much those Kazakhstanis love to fight in Abu Dhabi. They want that home crowd, their home advantage, I guess, because I doubt we'd ever get a card in Russia, but that was one source I heard today, was that Ankalaev wanted to fight in Abu Dhabi more than he wanted to fight against Alex Pereira. Pereira would have fought Ankalaev, but Ankalaev didn't want it.
It doesn't even seem like that bad of a matchup. Like, when you think about everyone talking about the UFC protecting Alex Pereira, on a certain level, yes, because he is the biggest star right now. But on another level, I don't think that Ankalaev is a horrible matchup for Pereira. He is the worst so far, I would say, because he has some level of wrestling. But we already saw Alex Pereira take on someone like Jan Blachowicz, who primarily tried to wrestle him. And yes, it was a close decision, but Alex Pereira has improved his takedown defense and overall just his MMA game.
In a Pereira versus Ankalaev matchup, Ankalaev would have to wrestle Pereira and take him down at least 5 times to win that fight. You know, if Ankalaev wanted to stand, that's where he loses that fight. He would have to have him on the ground basically for 25 minutes straight to be able to secure that win, because you give Alex Pereira a minute and it's game over, especially when Ankalaev's striking doesn't match up to the guys that Pereira has beat recently.
So this is Pereira's third title defense and his third fight in 2024. He's the most active fighter other than Kevin Holland. It's smart because he's 37, so he has to get this money-making, these fights in right now.
It's very similar to what we were talking about last week with when Usman and Adesanya were both champions, how much those two are fighting. And like, it's the way to project yourself to stardom, you know, especially as being Pereira, who's not like, it's harder for him to market himself being a non-English speaker, you know, like he has to market himself in the ring, and he's the biggest name in UFC for what he does in the ring. So why would he not want to fight, you know? And it does make it easier a little bit when you are not fighting crazy matchups every time and you kind of just get to keep on doing your thing. Like, I think we would get a little bit longer of a camp if we were going to fight against Ankalaev, just because you would hope that Pereira would train a little bit of wrestling and jiu-jitsu in that time span and not just work on striking. But here against Rountree, it's baby food. It's the same thing that he's done twice this year already. He's fighting against another striker, and he's just going to come out there and he's going to chin him. You know, Rountree might put up a fight, and I think Rowntree's could make him a name for himself if he puts up a fight. If he can make it to the 4th round even, like, that's further than Hill and Yuri have made it, and that kind of pushes him up into that next tier of those light heavyweights. But what do you think about Rountree?
So Rountree is ranked number 8, coming off of a win against Anthony Smith, who, as we've seen, that doesn't age very well for him.
Lionheart.
And a failed drug test against an opponent who is supposed to take on Jamal Hill at UFC 303, which Alex Pereira ended up saving that card, which is kind of ironic. So he's not had a super active recent history. He is, I think, off of a 5 or a 6 fight win streak, and the majority of those being knockouts. So that does bode well for him. But again, does he really deserve a title shot after beating Anthony Smith? I think the obvious answer for everyone is no, compared to someone like Ankalaev, who hasn't lost a fight since 2018 and who's beaten 5 ranked opponents. It just doesn't add up. But we've seen this happen before. Does Steve Erceg deserve a title shot against Pantoja? Not really. Did Dan Henderson deserve a title shot against Michael Bisping? No. So it's not the first time that we've seen the rankings not really mean anything, but it is always kind of frustrating because, you know, why does Ankalaev work so hard to get up the rankings if the UFC doesn't want to give him a title shot anyways?
I think there is partially UFC wanting to have more Pereira wins, you know. Definitely. And I think it might have been if Ankalaev did want to fight, which I'm not sure if he did, if we have Ankalaev versus Pereira might not take this fight at 307, even though I think he does because he's a BMF out there. But also we have to look at the fact that while this may not be the best matchup that the UFC could have made for Alex Pereira, it's still an Alex Pereira fight. You know, as UFC fans, he's probably the best fighter to watch. If I were to book a card, he's the guy I'd want to main event any card. you know? So as fans, we got to appreciate that Alex Pereira is going to fight, even though some UFC fighters might not be the biggest fans of this.
Yeah. Dylan, what do you think about Rountree losing against Johnny Walker?
Well, Johnny Walker lost to the new UFC gloves. Did you see that the meme I sent you today?
Yeah.
That's his biggest nightmare right now in the UFC is the new gloves. Without them, he's probably beaten Pereira at 307, but with these new gloves, just not it for Johnny Walker.
So do you think the reason that they're making this fight instead of an Ankalaev fight is because they don't want to risk Pereira losing and then not being able to match him up with, a Tom Aspinall, a John Jones, or an Adesanya 3?
I think that this is the safest option for UFC, I think would be the best way to say it. Because I don't know if they're scared, I think obviously Ankalaev versus Pereira would sell a little bit more than Rountree, who's relatively unknown to a casual fan base. And with Ankalaev, you do get like a little bit more of like the Dagestani people who know the Dagestani fighters. So I think that for UFC's perspective, it's just a little bit more of a safer fight to potentially set up a super fight with a John Jones, a Tom Aspinall, or an Israel Adesanya.
Out of those 3 fights, who do you want to see the most?
Adesanya. John Jones and Tom Aspinall are both big dudes.
Yeah, they both probably weigh in at about 260 in the octagon.
Yeah, like John Jones would wrestle Pereira, and I think he would win.
Definitely.
I think he's a wrestler that beats Pereira any day of the week. Tom Aspinall is a little bit more of an interesting matchup, but I also think that Tom Aspinall is just a little bit more powerful for Pereira, and he's fast enough. We don't know how Pereira would fight at heavyweight, so I think that Israel Adesanya is the best matchup, even though I still think that it's a pretty easy Pereira dub with Adesanya going up in weight. How about you? Which one out of the 3?
Well, I think Izzy is the most realistic fight. I honestly do believe that Pereira will move up to heavyweight at one point. Just how much it's been talked about. Even the endorsement from Joe Rogan helps.
That is true.
It does help, honestly. And even though, Izzy has moved up to 205 and he got beaten by Jan Blachowicz, I think there's still a possibility that we see that. Izzy, his mindset has changed quite a bit just from the 305 pressers from what we've seen. And I don't know if we're going to see a retirement out of Izzy.
I think that if he loses tonight, he either has to go up or else I think the UFC is going to use him as food for the guys coming up. I don't know if Adesanya will ever get back to a middleweight championship, but who knows? Maybe he reinvents himself at a light heavyweight division, which outside of Pereira is a little bit weaker. I think pound for pound, he's better than Yuri, who I would say is the second best light heavyweight. So it could be the move in the future, especially if Pereira goes up to heavyweight. Adesanya could go up to light heavyweight.
Well, it could be a Max Holloway situation where we've seen Max Holloway fight at lightweight against Dustin Poirier, and he didn't bulk up correctly, and he didn't have the same power that those guys had. We could have seen that with Israel Adesanya when he moved up the first time to light heavyweight. Maybe he didn't bulk up correctly and didn't have the same power, didn't have the same physicality as those guys. So it does look like he's been on the sauce a little bit leading up to 305, just how big he is. He has Gyno again.
Only the dumb people get caught with PEDs. It's as simple as that. They're all juicing and only the dumb ones caught. It's what I've talked about my whole life as being a major sports fan. In every sport, anyone who gets caught, they're being dumb.
So let's talk about the rest of the card, because this card actually lined up pretty nicely for how it came together last minute. Obviously, we have 308 right after and 306 right before it, which are 2 massive cards. And then this 307 just kind of got snuck right in the middle, but we have some good matchups. So we have Raquel Pennington versus Juliana Pena, which isn't the best matchup that people want to see on a big card. WMMA just doesn't hit the same.
They got to put it somewhere, so...
Unless it's Zhang Weili.
Zhang Weili is my pound for pound GOAT. Number 1, Zhang Weili.
And then we have Stephen Thompson versus Joaquin Buckley, which is going to be an unreal striking fight.
Banger! Banger on banger!
Definitely just blew out the mic there.
Banger on banger.
And then we have Jose Aldo taking on Mario Batista.
Another solid fight.
Yeah, it's good. I'm not super excited to see Aldo fight just because he is a little bit out of his prime, but he does always have good performances.
Aldo should have gone out on top at 301 in Brazil. Why not go out there? What else is he going to do? Make more money. and then probably go to bare knuckle.
Just
Fight John Dodson.
He's just gonna fight contenders and destroy their dreams. And then we have Roman Dolidze taking on Kevin Holland. So we saw Roman Dolidze defeat Anthony Smith in light heavyweight just a couple cards ago, and then Kevin Holland is coming off a win against Michelle Olajaychuk. So two people who are coming off wins. Kevin Holland's always exciting. It seems like they can throw him on any card because he's also one of those BMF people who will just say yes to any fight. Unfortunately, that does kind of lead him to bad career decisions and not ever really moving up in rankings. But he's fun. He's a gangster, so we love watching him fight.
If it were UFC 5, Kevin Holland's like career would go down like 7 or 8% every fight. Like just no turnaround time. Like he does like the 1 week camp option.
And then we have Aljamain Sterling versus Movsar Evloev. Evloev, I believe, is undefeated in the featherweight division, so that's going to be a good fight. People forget, man. People forget Aljamain Sterling. He is an incredible fighter. He just wins fights. Yes, he's boring, but he's super underrated for a former champion. Obviously, he got chinned by O'Malley, but he's a great fighter, and he still is. He moved up to featherweight, and I'm excited to see if he can derail Movsar, because Movsar is equally as boring.
This is going to be a big fight because it's kind of going to be either fraud checking Evloev and kind of humbling him and realizing that he may not be
a top 5
exactly with that undefeated record, or maybe if Aljamain wins it, he might bump up in the rankings and 2 fights away from a title shot potentially, beating a Brian Ortega or Diego Lopez away from fighting Max or Ilya or Volk, whoever's the champion at the time.
Definitely. And then the last fight, Ketlin Vieira versus Kayla Harrison. Kayla Harrison coming off a win and her debut at UFC 300. I'm excited to see her fight. She's a very physical WMMA fighter. One of the only ones I could probably name, to be honest. And that's about it. I don't have anything else to say about that fight.
Yeah, it's a solid card, outside of the Pereira fight, there's nothing that's really going to like blow you away, but it's a card that has 7 fights that I could see headlining a fight night, So it's going to be a good night of UFC surrounding nights with huge top fights with Sean and with
Ilya
and Alexa Grasso,
Oh yeah, that's true.
So it's going to be exciting. It's also, we got it 3 weeks before a card, so it's basically a fight night.
Pretty much, yeah.
Like the way that Dana's been booking pay-per-views, we can't complain about extra pay-per-view events.
I'm not complaining. It turned out to be a good card. I always love to see Pereira fight. And the only other thing that I want to talk about was Yuri in the build up to UFC 305, which is happening the night that we're recording this. He says that he is 2 wins away from a rematch with Alex Pereira.
I think that's
is
true.
He coping?
I think that's realistic because he's really got to earn it to get a 3rd fight against Pereira. Mm-hmm. You lost twice. They're not going to book you for a 3rd fight against the guy who's chinned you twice, unless you really prove yourself. He would have to beat an Alberg or a Hill or even a Rountree after this fight,
Yeah, or 2 of them.
Exactly. He's got to get 2 big wins in that light heavyweight division to even sniff that title picture again.
And that's all we have for UFC 307. We have tons more content coming out about UFC 305 all of this week, so stay tuned for that.
Peace out.
See ya.